made the coffee yet? What's going on, guys? Welcome to another Coffee Table podcast. Like always, I've got the most best, amazing person sitting across from me. Let me tell you, David's great. I've already had a little bit of a conversation with him while I've been fixing him up some coffee. But guys, just as I always do before we start, listen, do all the things the YouTubers and the Spotify people tell you to do. Subscribe, comment, like. It really gets this content out there. And not only that, I have started a GoFundMe campaign. The idea is to increase the quality so that my guest, like David here, can be better represented as time goes on this podcast. But that being said, because nobody wants to listen to that crap, David, how are you doing, man? What's going on?
Oh, man, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me this morning, William.
Yeah, dude, don't even sweat it. David, I always love starting a podcast off like this because I always love getting to know the individual. So I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself, David. Who are you?
Try to keep it a little brief. Reel me back in if I get down too many rabbit holes. But I'm 47 years old, married, and we have a baby girl whose birthday is actually today. She turned 1 today. Grew up in Riverdale. I was born at Crawford Lawn. Grew up in Riverdale, Clayton County for the first half of my life, and moved out of there and found myself in. We'll skip through some of it, but found myself in up in Cobb County in about 2000. Around 2006, I moved to Cobb. For quite some time after high school, I worked in the printing industry in all aspects of production and running equipment and working in sales and all that type of stuff. And around the 2006 time frame, I realized everything that we worked all these hours for and everyone was screaming for found its way to a trash can in about 3 days. So I joined the Army in 2007, went to Iraq in 2008, and got over there around the end of 2008 and spent most of 2009 there, came back in October, and started the hiring process with the Cobb County Police Department, and I've been here since January 2010.
No kidding, man. You know, David, it's always the transition that I hear. You know, when you come in from, we were discussing this a little bit earlier. It's like reservists, right? Reservists have a nature of going back and forth between civilian into, military, into civilian, into military, which is daunting in a way, right? Especially if you keep going active duty while you're reserved, kind of like I did, right? You spend a lot of time in active and then you have to make that quick transition into civilian. But you spent time, elongated time for that matter, in the Army. And I can only imagine coming in, and was it a Cobb County police officer, right?
Yes, I started here when I came home after the deployment.
How was the transition into being a police officer? I mean, was it fairly seamless? Was it difficult? What was that experience like?
No, it was actually really good. A lot when I started the academy, I was 33, so I was 30 when I went in the Army Reserves, and so I was 33 roughly when I started the police academy, and I started there straight from deployment. Like I said, I came home in October, started the hiring process, and started the academy in January. So very short time frame from like Iraq to the classroom. And to me, I mean, I actually enjoyed the academy quite a bit. First couple of weeks were driving and shooting, and a lot of the fun stuff that they got to get out of the way to. It's kind of like the go or no go parts of it. So, but it was pretty fun.
Well, one of the I've got to be better about that, David. I did this in my last podcast, and I'm going to point it out again because I need to learn a lesson. I need to stop saying I do it so much, man. I say and I'll say right, sometimes. I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. Now, David, I want to ask, one of the spiciest subjects right now, is the idea of training police officers correctly, training them a bit more better. On the college campus, I'm just now graduating from college, but I can tell you, among the college-aged individual, that is a conversation that is constantly had. Now, granted, you have, if you will, professors that kind of instigate that conversation because they have a certain view. Which is fine, right? I'm interested. How was your training, David? What was that like?
I'll say that the Cobb County Police Department training is, bar none, probably the best in the Southeast, if not one of the top in the nation. I've heard these conversations, these topics a lot, especially, funny enough, around every election cycle, the police are evil and they're just out murdering people every 3.5 years. All of a sudden, the police are murdering everybody on the streets. I'll say this as far as the training goes. It's just like take your college classes and take every student that just finished that one same course and then go have them all do the same task and see how many different ways you get it done. It's the same thing. Like, police are not robots; they're human beings. So you can't say, "Well, I had this same interaction with a cop in Kennesaw Police 2 weeks ago, and he did it like this, and now you're doing it like this, and it's because of this." Those dots just don't connect. You have a human factor in there. So while everyone gets the same training, not everyone's level of experience, everyone's life experience, everyone's maturity, like all of those things play a factor into the way that different police officers handle different things.
I have a tendency to agree with you on that, right? We all have our individual stories. We all have our individual circumstances that happen to us that lead us to react in certain ways. No, I'm right. I'm right there with you on it, David. One of the reasons why I wanted to ask you that is there's a fair amount of empathy involved when you come into a leadership position, right? And you come into a leadership position in such a way that you are an emulation, you are a standard, right? You have to have the ability to empathize. You do. You have to have the ability to empathize. Not only empathize for the police officer, right? But you also have to empathize for the person that's being handled by the police officer. Now, I'm curious. What have you ever had a circumstance where you may have disagreed with the police officer in terms of how he treated an individual? I know that's probably a niche question to ask, man, but
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer the question. I'm not going to give specifics, and I'm not going to call anybody out by name. But yes, there's a lot of discretion, and there's a lot of leeway in the way, you know, arguably, the letter of the law and the spirit of the law, and how certain things fall into different criteria. And yes, I've had strong disagreements with the way people have handled stuff in the past. And the one incident I'm speaking of specifically, that he doesn't work here anymore, and he hasn't for quite some time, which is a good thing. But yeah, I feel like you hit on empathy, and I think a lot of that comes from age and experience, and just life experience in general, and it gives you different viewpoints. We have a little girl that turns 1 today, and I'm 47 years old, and I feel like I'll be a better father now than I probably would have been 15 years ago, because you have lived a little bit more and you've seen a little bit, a little bit more of things to kind of help shape your views on certain stuff. But yes, there's always different ways to do, and a lot of times you'll see people do it several different ways, all of which are right, and it's just how and they see it and process that information.
so David, let me ask. I wanted to ask you these kind of preliminary questions to kind of get to know you a little bit, but you are running for sheriff. You were running for sheriff, man. And I think these aspects are important to talk about, having the ability to empathize with, your fellow police officers or your fellow, sheriff folks, right? Having the ability to empathize with the people in general is huge as well. But these things stem from what I think is interesting is the word service, right? And that's something that seems to be thematic with you. And I want to kind of go back to the Army real quick. What propelled you? What propelled you to join the Army? What was the factor that you think led you that way?
So like I said, I worked in the printing industry for a long time, and I just remember being there one day, and we were working on the timelines all get compressed, and by the time it gets out to actually being produced, it's a crunch, and everyone's screaming for their materials because they have to have it for a lunch, in 6 hours. And that's when I realized, like, everything you're giving your life to, because essentially that's all your job is. They're paying for part of your life because you're never going to get it back. It ended up in the trash can. Everything we printed, almost like. I didn't work for, publishers, so all the stuff we worked for, was flyers and other sheet-fed little pamphlets. It all ends up in the trash. So that's when and this was '06, so there was a lot going on in '06, '07. And I was turning 30, and I thought I was too old, and I ran into a Vietnam vet at the airport, and he was like, man, they upped the age during wartime, so I called a recruiter the next day and ended up joining and going, because at the end of the day, I wanted to do something with your life that would leave an impact on other people, even if you never met them. Like, you may never see them, you may never know the impact. Like, you may affect this person's life that, you never even know them, but what you did in this time may positively benefit someone else, even if it's years down the road.
What you're bringing up, man, again, you're towing this line of leadership. I can see it, right? Exactly what you just said, in the sense of, like, okay, you may just give this little itty bit of influence on this person's life, but it could impact the way that he conducts himself in the future, he or she for that matter. And it kind of goes in line, I'll be honest with you, David, I was listening to my pastor the other day, which you're supposed to do at church, I found out. Yeah, right. And he was talking about, in terms of like pursuing Christianity and helping other individuals pursue Christianity, it's not necessarily that you got to go in and like hammer down, like you need to be a Christian, as much as it is that you need to understand whether you are part 1 of their journey or you're like part 21 of their journey, and being content with the fact that you're either part 1 or part 21. Either you're the point where you sit down and have a cup of coffee and you just happen to talk about, Christ and all of that fun stuff, or you're at part 21 where you are handing them the Bible and they're like, I'm ready to read. But being content with whatever part that you play. What part did you play possibly when you maneuvered your way into like the policing, right? Was there an individual that kind of latched onto you maybe in policing, or some kind of mentorship role that you did play? Can you talk about that?
Like a mentor for me, or like a role I played as a mentor for someone else?
I want to hear a role that you played as a mentor.
Okay, yeah. So great question. When I started with the police department, everyone has police do a lot of stuff. You have accident reconstruction, and like there's a whole plethora of stuff that the cops do. I really didn't care about any of that, to be quite honest. All I wanted to do was go after the most violent people that victimize people that are just going about their daily life. So that's kind of what guided my career with the police department. But yeah, as far as influencing and being role models for other people, when I was at Precinct 3, you can start being what they call a FTO, or a field training officer, after 3 years, and it's the same kind of thing with like joining the Army. I didn't really want to do it because it's just kind of a pain. You have the kids that go through the academy, and then they ride with their field training officers for, at that time it was what they call DORs. It was 60 of them, so it's essentially 3 months, and you got this brand new kid in your car, and they're driving, and you're having to teach them, like they've been in the classroom, and now they have to learn how to practically apply it. And, it's a lot of work, and it's quite a pain. And I didn't really want to do it, but I was watching some others at the time, and there were some really good candidates coming through that I felt weren't getting the best training they could get. And so I'm very, if I'm going to complain about a topic, then I'm going to try to improve it. So that's when I became a field training officer, and had, several recruits ride with me throughout the time. And, they'll switch their FTOs for a couple weeks just so they get a different aspect. And some of the kids that rode with me for just a couple weeks, they still work here, and we're actually really good friends now, because I was very different than who they were partnered up with the whole rest of the time. And again, I'm not going to put out names, but I can think of several that it's just a different aspect. So it was good to teach people, and you kind of see that light bulb come on, and then they get it, and sometimes they understand the difference of what you can do and what you should do. It's not always the same. You have a lot of discretion, and sometimes it's good to exercise that.
I'll give you a story, man. I was this was at the basic reconnaissance course over at Camp Pendleton, right? And I was going through it and all that fun stuff, and I was horrible at it, dude. I was horrible at that thing. Listen, I did well, David. I did well in the pool. I could swim all day. You could throw me any brick you wanted to throw me. You could tell me to go drown, and I'd attempt it. But like, but on land, dude, I suffered, man. I suffered real bad, and I remembered so many times where I just felt so bad for my teammates because like I wasn't doing any good. They knew that they could give me bricks and water. Man, you add weight on my back on land, and it was just not pretty. I made it through, though. I made it through. But David, one of the funniest things, and this is like greenhorn stuff, right? You're new into the military. You're new into this whole environment of reconnaissance and what it calls you to do during this training period. And we were going down this steep hill, man. And I remember going up to this sergeant. He was a recon guy. He was one of our teachers, I guess you could say. And I go up to him. I was like, "Hey, sergeant, so is there like a really like efficient way to walk downhill that you can tell me about?" I mean, he just gave me the stupidest look. He was like, you are you're going to carry a lot of weight when you get on the teams, man. You're going to be one of those, which means you're dumb.
You're dumb, but you'll be strong.
Exactly. So I gotta ask, because this is just funny. I mean, when you're dealing with these greenhorns, when you're dealing with these new kids, did you ever get a question that was just like, dude, why are you asking this question?
Man, I saw a lot of stuff where I was like, what made you think this made sense? Yeah, there was a lot. I can't recall them all at the moment. The one specifically, we were going to a gas station was just robbed, and so now that's a crime scene. And this kid didn't make it through training either. Let me just go ahead and preface the story. But we get there, and there's other officers there, and like I guess he just wanted an energy drink and a Snickers, and like he went and got it and walked to the register to try to pay for it, and like, hey man, like what are you doing, man? Like this store was just robbed. You can't purchase something. Everything here is a crime scene now, and it's like he just couldn't understand it.
But he wanted an energy drink. Come on, man.
3 or 4 in the morning. It was a rough night for him. Like many of them.
That's David. That's hilarious. I mean, come on, dude. Homie wanted a Monster.
He did. He wanted it bad too. But no.
Well, David, let me ask you this, man. You've done transitions at this point, dude. You've done the Army. You've gone into the police action. You've done SWAT. Right. I want to talk about that a little bit. What is the career in SWAT? What has it taught you the most, you think?
God, man, the most, some of the biggest things it taught you or teaches you is one, is humility, because there's always somebody that's either going to be stronger, faster. Like, it's just humble, and everybody plays their part, right? Like, no matter what the call is, no matter how, the high level or critical nature of the call, there's no insignificant position to fill. It's taught me the importance of having the right people in the right positions. But yeah, most importantly, and accountability. It's you come from a recon background, so I'm sure the after actions and the back briefings were probably relatively unfiltered and harsh, and you learn real quick. I mean, you own your mistakes and you get better. But it's been the best part of my career, hands down. And I've been there for 10 years now. I spent 6.5 on TAC, which is our full-time component of SWAT. We don't have a full-time SWAT team, but we have an element of guys that that's all they do. But even with that, they're not serving warrants and stuff every day. They're partnered up with our violent crime unit guys, and they just work the more violent parts of the county. Generally throughout the month, except for the week of SWAT training. But that was hands down allowed me to do a lot of really, really cool stuff that I would have never got to see or be a part of if I wasn't over there.
Hey man, if you're not doing cool stuff, what even are you doing?
Ask myself all the time.
That was, dude, honestly, it was one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got. It was like, listen, if you're going to go join the military, you might as well go do something cool. Right. And something cool happened to be just carrying a really large pack on my back with a huge, how do I even say this? A radio that was from Vietnam. It's like, come on. No, I loved it. I loved my job.
Yeah, it's mostly miserable, but there's probably some very short time frames where it's like the best thing in the world.
When you're with the guys, David, that's what it is. When you're with the guys, with
the shared misery,
it builds that camaraderie, dude. Now, David, I want to ask, as we continue through this, right? Okay, Army. Cobb County SWAT team. You are now progressing into something I think totally new, in the sense of it's not just service oriented. Yes, sheriff is a position of service, right? It is. And I think that's how you should view it. But you're also dealing with, how do I say this? You are going to be the individual that people come to and view as an emulation, right? And in that, you've actually had to deal with politics for probably the first time in your life. What has that been like for you? What does that transition look like?
It's been busy. It's kind of like you go into something and you don't know what you don't know, and you'll be told, you're going to be busy. It's going to be a lot, but you don't really know what that looks like until you find yourself in the middle of it. So it really has. So, but, because I still work for the police department, so that just adds another layer of a tight line to walk. Working for the police department, running against the county sheriff. So, it creates a balance. But to be honest with you, I haven't really had too much difficulty with that, because I never really cared to just throw mud or go down those roads. So it's not too bad, but it's a lot between between regular work and then being at fundraisers and breakfasts and meet and greets and then wife and a baby and then the military too. It gets to be quite a bit. Yeah, I've got to keep two calendars. I've got it on my phone calendar, and I got one at the house on the table with everything written in there, so my wife can kind of keep up with it too.
Well, man, you look behind me here. It's like, yeah, I've got my phone calendar as well, but I've got like 2 other calendars behind me for my stuff. It's crazy, man. It really is. But God, you talk about your wife and you talk about, your kid. And service isn't such a thing. And I've discussed this before on this podcast, but I always like getting other individuals' point of view. Service isn't necessarily, oh, I'm going to serve and sacrifice. It's everybody else that's attached with me is going to serve and sacrifice, for that matter. Your wife is going to serve and sacrifice. Your children are going to serve and sacrifice, right? Has that played any tolls that are different in the sense of, like, you being the Cobb County Police, right, the SWAT team, et cetera, but transitioning into this role of running for sheriff? Has there been any kind of difference in your wife having to deal with something that otherwise she didn't really have to deal with before?
To be honest, she always carries a lot of the weight as far as like home life. When we started dating, I was on our full-time SWAT team. We started dating at the same time I went to that, so the op tempo, so to speak, has always been busy. I transitioned off of that team when I got promoted in July of 22. So going back to a precinct, that was a little bit more of a little different. But to be honest, it's always been busy. It's just different. So nothing like I'm home a little bit less now than I even was before with and the schedule's mixed up a little bit more because doing stuff before I go to work. So yeah, it's been a little bit more, and I think not that there's been a tremendous amount yet, but I think the thought of watching politics and the way it works out, and she's just a little apprehensive of what may come, I guess, with social media and everything else. So, but in general, yeah, it's been a little bit busier.
It's a whole new realm, man. One of the best things you could do, and I think who was it? Who was it that I listened to, David? It was Joe Rogan. It was Joe Rogan, man, the king of podcast himself. He was saying, it's like, I don't even look at my Instagram comments anymore. I don't even look at my Twitter comments anymore. It's like, it's a bunch of bumbleо. Like, I don't want to look at it. It ruins my day. Why look at it? Right now, hear me out. There's something to be said about like understanding like what your constituents are talking about. What are individuals discussing? How can I be productive in this conversation, et cetera, et cetera. But man, social media, it's more just kind of hate talk.
A lot of times, there's been some positive comments, and I don't mind the like interaction. And if people have genuine questions or they want clarification on, because it's hard to really get your message out, whether it's even on your website or they read a couple bullet points you put out. It leaves a lot for people to essentially thought provoking, and like, hey, if they run into you or they want to send you a question for further detail, then that works great. And to be quite honest with you, I look forward to getting out and getting in front of more people, because we've had a lot of questions at the forums on how to thoughts on like trust and community and everything like that. And it's always the same to me. If you don't have those relationships built before times of crisis, you're not going to build them then. I mean, you will, but it's not going to be nearly as beneficial as it would have been if you had already had those relationships in place and met those people. The trust is a little bit easier then.
Well, David, let me ask you this then, man. What has been the most difficult question that you've received that you had to like kind of sit and think about, kind of ruminate over? Was there something that you just were not ready for, that you just really had to go home and like talk to your wife, like, man, that one just threw me for a loop?
I can't think of honestly can't think of anything that's been too off the wall. There's a lot that are, I'll call them uncomfortable conversations where you take, for instance, the nation state we're in right now with the open border crisis we've had for years, and then the 287G program that the current administration of the sheriff's office removed when they took over, the partnership with ICE. That's a not necessarily a delicate line to walk, but you really need people to not shut you off when you say that you will re-implement it, because there's a lot more to it than it's not Nazi Germany where you're not going around just like, show me your papers or you're going to jail. This is enforcement on people that are here illegally inherently or non-citizens, but also commit crimes. So like, that's where the program falls. It's not in place to target. It's not in place to do anything, and it's not in place to for any one specific demographic. It's just people that are here as non-citizens and are committing crimes.
Well, man, you take Lake and Riley, for example, right? And the issue was that this kid, this illegal fella, he was in and out. Like he had gotten jailed multiple times, right? And made his way all the way, what was it, from New York all the way back down here to Georgia, and jailed throughout the process. I mean, it was insane. It was insane that this person was allowed to continue to conduct himself within the United States of America, in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong, David, I understand that this falls on the federal government. I do, right? In terms of they've got the power to say, hey, this is our border. We're going to protect it, right? It's one of the most fundamental things the federal government is supposed to do, in my opinion. But I guess the sheriff does play somewhat of a part in that on a state level in terms of the county level.
Yeah, you play a heavy part in on the local level because at the end of the day, I listened to General Keane speak the other night, and he spoke at length about a lot of issues. And at the core of that, I took away was, you need strong leaders in place that aren't scared to tell you the truth and have your plan to tell them what you plan to do. And I listened to Trump speak at his luncheon a couple weeks ago, and a lot of that, hearing the problems and the difficulties at the national level, a lot of it is the same at the local level. And at the end of the day, I don't think that anything's going to be fixed from the top down. Like, you have to control what you can control at the local level, and then hopefully get your counterparts, and it just start to spread that way.
Well, that's why, I did it again, David. I said, but seriously though, man, that's why the founding fathers, one of the things they based our system on was that Mosaic Law, right? You go up from the family, essentially. Like, okay, the family's bickering. Okay, I'm going to go to Moses. No, that's not how this works. You start down here, and then you kind of work your way up all the way up.
Well, and the military teaches you that too, right? Handle your problems at the lowest level. Instill leadership and decentralize, like empower people to make decisions. Handle your issues at the lowest level possible. And if they need to rise up to here, then you can bring them to us and we'll deal with it. But you should be able to handle this before it gets to the higher levels.
Hey, man, that's the reason for the NCO. Yeah. Well, tell me, David, as we finish up here, what does David look like as sheriff? What are you running on? What specific things are you trying to address that aren't being addressed currently by the current sheriff administration?
Yeah, I mean, that's I've been here for 15 years, and to be quite honest with you, I've told a lot of people, I've read what the current sheriff campaigned on, or I should say his campaign manager campaigned on his behalf, because if you read any of the articles, it's his campaign manager speaking. And to be quite honest with you, if he had done all those things, I would stay where I'm at. I'm in a great position. I'm in a great position with the county. I'm still on the SWAT team and a team leader on there, and I would never be out here in the middle of all this. So just a few of them real quick is like we just touched on with the open borders, the just massive amounts of people flooding the country, and the current administration getting rid of the federal partnership as soon as he took office. He did campaign on that, and I will give it to him. He did follow through with that one, which is one of the few he did. He also campaigned on reining in the budget that with the massive overspending. He campaigned on low morale and how bad it was under his predecessor. He campaigned on the mandatory overtime issues. He campaigned against the number of jail deaths that were going on under his predecessor. And all of those issues, none of them have improved, and almost all of them have worsened exponentially. He's created new units. He's got his own protection detail that follows him around. So to wrap it up, like, if you're going to sit in a public elected office that's for the benefit of the people and you're supposed to serve the community, humility goes a long way, right? You need to check your ego at the door before you come in and filter your decisions through what's best for the community, what's best for the people that are in your charge, even though they've been arrested and they're in the jail. Yes, they've been arrested on criminal charges, but they're your responsibility now. And, and what's so best for the community, best for your employees, and best for, the people that you're in charge of taking care of. But at the end of the day, I want to reallocate a lot of the resources that, in my opinion, are wasted. You talk about, I've heard them say recently that they're almost completely staffed, yet it still takes, the Cobb Police and the partner agencies in the county, 1 to 2 hours when you're trying to get people booked through the jail. And those are hours where that officer's not available to answer your 911 call or show up to answer your calls, to work your recs, to do anything. Everyone is struggling with manpower right now. So when you're taking someone out of service for 15 to 20% of their shift, if not longer sometimes, just to get one person in the jail, like, it's just a trickle effect. So, but to rein in spending, I've looked at some of it, and between his own personal protection detail and then the horses that are a friction point with a lot of people, I mean, you're talking probably at least close to $2 million a year just in those two items. Reinstating the 287G program. And then a big one is the morale. And, people have touched on that question a bunch at some of the different forums we've been to. My thoughts on morale are, if you look at the current executive staff and command staff that are there, it's somewhere between 11 and 13 people, and very few of those people are organic to the sheriff's office. Most of those people were brought in from the outside. I'm not certain of the relationship he had with them prior, but I think that definitely hampers morale when people see that their efforts and their 10 and 20 years of service, they get, they hit their ceilings when they see other people brought in to fill those positions. So it's very important to me, which was why it was very important to me to find the correct person to serve as a chief deputy. And I found Mike Dondelinger, who retired from there in December with almost 30 years of service and had done a tremendous amount across all the aspects of the sheriff's office, because I know I've not worked for the sheriff's office, but it was very important for me to fill that role with someone who has, with that experience, just like it would be important for me to fill all the other roles from promoting from within when it is at all possible. So that's a plan to work on the morale and some of the other stuff that's going on there. That answer your question?
Yeah, brother, that sure did. And I think that answered a lot of people's questions that are going to be watching this. It's like, what will David look like, if he's sheriff? And, I think you gave a fairly good explanation. I really do. It's God, the thing about the horses and his own security detail.
I don't understand it. I've yet to ever find a credible threat. I've asked for them. I've asked commissioners, and no one can really show you one. So I don't know. Maybe there is one.
Maybe it just makes him feel important.
And quite frankly, it could. It builds a facade of importance when people see you show up with, 6 people and they're following you around and they're all telling you how great you are. But I think I tend to oversimplify quite a bit, and because I feel like most issues aren't that complicated after when you break it down. So a lot of the filters and the decision making that I go through is very filtered into just a few categories, because I don't think most issues are as complicated as people make them out to be.
Well, David, thank you so much for coming on and talking, man. Yeah, dude, absolutely, man. It was an absolute pleasure. And David, by all means, if you ever want to reach out again, just let me know. And do you have anything else you want to say to like the folks that are going to be voting for you? Is there anything you want to end off on?
For sure. Early voting starts April 29th, which is next week. Primaries are May 21st. So we do really need you to get out and vote, whether it's early voting or in the ballot box on May 21st. And you can find more information on me at cavenderforcobb.com. You can use the number 4 or spell it out. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Cavender for Cobb Sheriff. Feel free to send messages there, and I will get back with you.
All right, Dave. Well, cheers, bud. Good talk, man. I loved it. Yeah.